Welcome to the Healthy AF podcast. I'm your host, Zane Griggs, and with me today is Kyla Smook. Welcome, Kyla.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, I'm so glad you are here. Kyla's a fitness, performance, and nutrition coach who realized that if she wanted to get better results for her female clients, she'd need to help them optimize their health around their cycle. If they really wanted to get the full benefit of all their efforts in their training. Kyla, I'm so glad you joined me to share this because so many people, not enough people are talking about this. So many people have no clue about how to address this or approach this. So this has been great insight here. It's certainly none that I would personally have, but I've kind of had to deal with over the years with clients and really had no idea what I was talking about. So glad you're here to explain it. Kyla, it's been a while. We met in Costa Rica.
We did almost 2 years ago. No, a year ago.
It was about a year ago. I think it was
It
last
feels
March.
forever ago.
It does. It was last March, I think.
Yeah.
At Paul Saladino's retreat. And you are quite the adventurer, I have to say. You were planning to stay there for like a month.
I was supposed to be there for like 3 months, and then, I mean, you know what happens.
Yeah, you had a little. You're quite as the adventurer that you are. You had a little accident and stuff. So, but you were still getting around like crazy by the time. I mean, you had your hands wrapped up. But then I saw
I
you were
did.
scooting
I
around
was
on a
walking around with
scooter.
two broken wrists, but I was making it work.
You were. You were, and I heard there you're a barefoot runner, so you do a lot of races barefoot,
I
which is
am,
pretty
yes.
amazing. Uh, what kind of distances are you usually doing?
So moderate, I mean, 13, 14 miles. The races that I compete in are like 12 to 13 miles. So I do competitive Spartan races.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay,
So I love
cool.
barefoot running though. It's been such a cool journey to heal all of my running injuries because, I used to run all the time and have constant injuries. And when I started running barefoot, I fixed all that. So
Wow,
yeah.
that's great. So which is not what people would normally think, but it caused those muscles that were supposed to be active to activate. I'm guessing.
Yeah. I mean, I can go down a whole rabbit hole with that.
Yeah, I know. I'm just so people have an idea of it. I mean, you spent most of the time when I saw you there, you were barefoot pretty much most
Yeah.
of the time you're in Costa Rica. If you could,
Yep.
do it, which is a great place to be barefoot. In Santa Teresa, it's like you just fit right in.
It is. That's like basically the whole reason I went there.
You can walk barefoot, nobody looks at you funny.
Exactly.
Yeah, half the town's barefoot. So it's it's great to connect with you again. But I had no idea when I met you the level of training that you're doing and of competition, but also and this aspect of your coaching.
Hmm.
So I'm so glad to have you here to talk about that. Let's just get into it because again, I think it's an area where a lot of women don't realize they need help, or they don't realize what the problem is when they're trying to make changes to their health, and they're not seeing the results that they want. They're not seeing the effects that other people are getting, maybe, and
Yeah.
there seems to be something wrong
Hmm. Yeah.
here.
It's sad because like why would women understand this aspect of their health? We're never taught it. We don't get taught about our menstrual cycle in school. We don't get taught about our hormones or anything like that. So it's like when problems start to go wrong, this would be the last place we look because we don't even know it exists.
Right. So let's dive in when you start, like, kind of like, let's just explain it from scratch here. So uh, like how the cycle works, the phases. Let's get into the phases. And I think a lot of people still, women including, aren't that familiar with the phases of their cycle and how that changes their hormones in their body, like
Yeah.
what that actually means. So let's just start there.
Yeah, absolutely. And I didn't know about the phases and all these
Of course
things.
not.
I didn't
Yeah.
know any of these things existed even 2 years ago. And it's been like such a cool journey to learn about all this. But yeah, so we actually have 4 phases in our monthly cycle as women. A lot of women believe that the main event of their cycle is their period, and then there's just 3 weeks of nothing, and then a period again, and it just keeps going like that. But there's so much more to it. And so our cycle starts with our menstrual phase, which is our period, obviously. And do you want me to explain the hormone levels as well and like everything that's going on, or just kind of stay high level?
Let's get it. Let's on this. I think it'd be great to explain the fluctuations between progesterone and estrogen and how that kind of parallels with everything. I really do think that's important.
Okay. So during your menstrual phase, which is about 5 to 7 days, all hormone levels are very low. So estrogen's low, progesterone's low, testosterone's low. As our period ends, we're going to move into our follicular phase. And during this phase, the body is preparing for ovulation. When the body prepares for ovulation, estrogen has to get really high to allow us to ovulate. So the follicular phase is about 10 days. Estrogen's going to get really high. All the other hormone levels are still pretty low. And then we are going to ovulate. And when a woman ovulates, it's when our ovary is releasing an egg to make a baby. This only happens once per cycle, which most women don't realize. So the body's going to release an egg. At this time, testosterone is going to spike. Women's testosterone spikes once per cycle as well. It's about 2 days before ovulation and 2 days after. So estrogen is high, testosterone's high. We're going to ovulate. That egg is going to live for about 24 hours. And then as it dies, estrogen is going to go down because we don't really need it anymore. So once we've ovulated, we're then going to move into our luteal phase, which is when the body is preparing for a baby, because our body doesn't actually realize once we've ovulated that the egg has either been fertilized or not been fertilized. Our body doesn't get the memo for a few weeks.
Gotcha.
So just in case, the body is going to increase progesterone now. So estrogen is the dominant hormone in the follicular phase. Progesterone is the dominant hormone in the luteal phase. So testosterone's going to go back down, stay down for the rest of the cycle. Progesterone is going to begin rising. And it does this because it needs to build up the uterus lining to support a potential baby. So progesterone goes up. The luteal phase lasts for about 14 days. Once the body realizes there's no baby there, the progesterone's going to go back down, and we are going to shed the uterus lining, which is then your period, and the whole cycle begins again.
Right. Great. Okay. Makes sense. That makes sense.
It sounds like a lot in the beginning, but once you start to learn it, it just becomes second nature to, feel your body going through these different things. And every phase has a completely different energy to it. It has different strengths and weaknesses and different nutritional needs. And it's really cool once women are able to lean into this and start to really feel these different phases, how much it changes their relationship with their body and with their health and with their femininity.
That's great. Yeah. No, doesn't insulin also go up during the luteal phase, I believe? Does it cause some of those hunger feelings?
Yes. So progesterone is supported by high insulin levels, by high glucose. So it needs to go up to support progesterone. So that's why during our luteal phase, it's really important that we minimize fasting and increase our carb intake so that we can support those insulin levels going up to support progesterone.
That makes sense.
So a lot of women that struggle with really short luteal phases, they struggle with low progesterone levels. It can often be because they're tanking their progesterone by fasting, by not eating enough carbs. So women that are on a keto diet constantly throughout their whole cycle, it may be helpful while you're in your follicular phase, but when you're in your luteal phase, it's going to tank everything.
That makes sense. Yeah. Because insulin is keeping you from burning fat anyway when it's elevated. So you're going to need more energy from your diet.
Yes.
Rather than trying to burn it from your body. If insulin's high, you're not going to be able to access as much stored fat. So that makes complete sense. So that's really gets into the next question. I was going to ask you how nutrition and other health habits, lifestyle habits can optimize or support your hormone levels at the different phases. So it sounds like you coach your clients to allow themselves more carbohydrate, a little less, maybe more another meal or more spread out meals throughout the day during the luteal phase. Is that correct?
So during the luteal phase, wait, sorry, repeat what you said?
You would allow for more meals, like less fasting, more meals throughout the day, more carbohydrate intake during that luteal phase to support the progesterone.
Yes, exactly. So estrogen and progesterone, you eat kind of opposite ways to support each one. So in the follicular phase, estrogen is supported by low glucose levels, by low insulin.
Hmm.
And so to support the rise of estrogen, it actually is very beneficial for women to intermittent fast, to eat a much more high fat, low carb diet, so that we can support estrogen rising. And then we essentially flip flop that when we want to support progesterone by increasing our carbs, lowering our fasting, things like that. And then during the times, like for example, during your period, all hormone levels are very low. It's that women don't have to worry about tanking any hormone levels. So as long as we're supporting our body nutritionally, giving it the minerals that it needs to support our period, it's okay for a woman to intermittent fast, to eat a higher fat, low carb diet while she's on her period, because there's no hormones that we need to be supporting at that time.
Hmm. Got it. Got it. So it's really just thinking of really focusing on that progesterone having what it needs
Yeah, exactly. And
to.
then also there is a little actually caveat that I didn't add, which is that ovulation is, since it's our body releasing an egg and our body wants to make a baby, our body isn't going to perform that process if the body doesn't feel safe. So
Mm,
of course the body's not going to want to make a baby if it feels like that it's not a safe place to host a baby. So while you are in your follicular phase before ovulation, and while estrogen is high, the 3 to 4 days before ovulation, so leading into ovulation, we want to actually stop fasting and we want to increase our carb intake to let our body know, like, hey, this is a safe place to have a baby. You are safe to ovulate, you know? So even though we are still in our follicular phase at that time, it is important to increase carbs, lower fasting when you are getting close to ovulation so that your body actually can ovulate. Otherwise, you may delay ovulation, skip your ovulation, anything like that.
wow. So really, so the cortisol levels come down, I think would be a part of that.
Yes,
Less stress.
exactly.
Okay.
So if you're very stressed the few days before, even like the week before ovulation, if you travel and you get very jet lagged, if you get the flu or something, your body is going to set off alarm signals. Cortisol is going to be really high,
Hmm.
and you can very easily delay your ovulation.
Ooh, which would throw off your whole timing of what you think is going to happen or what's going on.
Exactly.
Or
It throws up the whole timing. Many women, like if a woman believes that, because it's the kind of the belief in the cycle space that women ovulate on day 15, and that's simply not true because it's different for every woman. It depends on so many factors. And if a woman's trying to get pregnant and she's assuming that she always ovulates on day 15, but let's say she has
mm,
higher cortisol, maybe she always ovulates on day 20. She's trying to get pregnant on day 15, she's having sex around day 15, she's never going to get pregnant and she's going to think that she's infertile, but really
uh,
she's just not doing things at the correct time of when she's ovulating. So it's important to know when you're ovulating as well, and if you're ovulating.
well, how would they know that? I mean, as a guy, I'm totally clueless, but I
No, no,
think
you're good.
anybody would want to know, like, okay, if I throw it off by a few days, how would I be able to tell if a certain level of, because I would think that level of stress that a woman could tolerate in within her cycle, whether it would throw it off or not, that would be variable to the person or what happens that week.
Yeah.
'Cause they may not realize what stressors are able to do that. Some may be more sensitive than others. So how is it personally that they'd be able to um, track that or make sure they're actually ovulating or when they're ovulating?
Yeah. So this is the beautiful part of getting in tune with your cycle. And one of the ways to do that is through the fertility awareness method. So this is something that is used as a means of birth control for women, but it can just be used as a means of knowing what the heck is going on in your cycle. So the way the fertility awareness method works is women track two key fertility signs. One of them is our basal body temperature. So the temperature of your body when you wake up in the morning. And the second one is your cervical fluid. So I'll talk about one and then I'll talk about the other.
Okay.
So our basal body temperature pre-ovulation is low. So typical is like in the low 97s, 97 point whatever. It's important that you have a thermometer that tracks the point whatever, because that's where it's going to fluctuate. Post ovulation, when progesterone rises, it increases our body temperature just slightly. And so if you look at a woman's temperature chart, you'll see that there's a consistent lower temperature pre-ovulation, and then the day she ovulates, her temperature is going to spike, and it should stay spiked post-ovulation until her period comes, and it'll
Uh,
spike by maybe half a degree. So
half a degree.
half a degree. So let's say pre-ovulation, my temperature was 97.1. Post-ovulation, my temperature may be 97.7, 97.8. For some
Gotcha.
women, it's more. For some women, it just depends on the woman.
So it's not a lot. You really have to be
It's
watching.
not, but women, you can chart your temperatures on an app called Kindara. And that'll like create a temperature chart for you where it's very easy to see that temperature shift.
Gotcha.
So what women do is you track your temperature. Your temperature will always spike when you've ovulated. So let's say you track your temperature for your whole cycle and it never spiked, or every single day it's just completely up and down crazy. That's a sign that you're not ovulating at all because your hormones are not regulated enough to ovulate. Or let's say a woman tracks her temperature and it's just consistently low for 30 days. Again, she never ovulated. Or maybe she tracks her temperature and on day 21 it spikes and then stays spiked. That means she ovulated on day 20.
Gotcha.
So it's really, really easy for women to understand when they're ovulating, when they're tracking this thing. And then the second factor we want to track is cervical fluid. So a woman's body produces cervical fluid, which is the discharge that a woman will find in her underwear, when she is fertile and she's nearing ovulation. So when a woman is like, let's say 5 days from ovulation, she'll start producing cervical fluid. It'll be kind of a dry texture. And as she gets closer and closer to ovulation day, it'll become wetter. It'll become like an egg white consistency, like a raw egg white consistency. And that shows her that she is very close to ovulation. Once her ovulation day happens, the next day, cervical fluid production will stop.
Oh.
So that's the second like sign that she can line up with her temperature to know, okay, I ovulated on this day. So when women are tracking those two things, it's very, very easy to know when she is ovulating, whether she even is ovulating at all.
Right.
And then there's other signs to track too. Like if you really want to get nitty-gritty, you can track your cervical position, things like that.
Well, those sound like two factors that if you can get them to line up, that'd be a pretty good sign of.
Yeah. So when you are
over time.
ovulating, they do line up. When they don't line up, there's a whole like science behind, if the factors do that, like if you can learn kind of what each one means. So a really great book on this is called Taking Charge of Your Fertility by, I think, Toni Weschler. And that book is like the holy grail of tracking your cycle. And she explains every single detail you could ever want to know about it. So I definitely recommend women go read that book if they want to understand when they're ovulating, if they're ovulating, all those things.
Taking charge of your fertility.
Taking charge of your fertility. And this is a great means of birth control too. I use this as a means of birth control, this method. So
I'll have to link to that in the show notes because that sounds like a great resource for anyone.
It's amazing, yeah.
Trying to keep track of this. Now, I mean, this is something where, like you said, I'm sure I would expect as a guy, having no knowledge of how this works, but women who are seeing like their doctor, the gynecologist on a regular basis, or however often they're supposed to, this would be explained at some point. So, like you said, so I know doctors, they probably learn this in med school, right?
No. The amount of gynecologists, so there's this gynecologist who I listen to his podcast, and I don't want to misquote him because I don't remember exactly what he said, but he basically along the lines said like gynecologists barely learn these things in school. The people who are supposed to educate women on their hormone health learn this at the smallest level. And so they aren't even informed enough to, like, women that learn the fertility awareness method are often more educated on their cycle than their gynecologist is.
That's scary.
So it is insane. We're not educated about this in school. We're not educated about this when we go to the gynecologist. All the gynecologist is going to do if you go in and say, oh, like, I have an irregular cycle, whatever it is, they're going to put you on birth control.
Right.
No questions asked. No education whatsoever.
That much I'm aware of. It's kind of like their catch-all for everybody.
I have never heard of a woman going into a gynecologist and them actually educating her on how her cycle works, which blows my mind.
Well, you just did it in like 10 minutes. I'm not sure what the holdup is. Like, it's like in 10 minutes, you probably just lit up some people, like turned on some light bulbs. They're like, Oh, I can do that. That's not hard. It's two things to pay attention to that happen every month. I just going to make sure that, and there's an app to help me track it. All I got to do is if I figure out these two things, I'm going to know within probably 80% certainty of what's going
Oh,
on.
way more than 80% certainty.
Okay. Month in and month out, it's like by the time you do this, I would think 3 or 4 times, you pretty much like, oh, I got this down. I got this figured out. I know what my body's going to do. I can feel it at this point, you
But
know?
the medical industry doesn't make money from women tracking their cycles. So they're not going to recommend a free resource that tells you everything you could possibly want to know about your cycle when they can put you on some expensive birth control.
Yeah. Right. Just script. It's real. I mean, let's face it. That's synthetic progesterone, basically,
Goodness. Yeah.
which is what, when they did when we finally had the Women's Health Initiative in the 90s, the first, women's health study that they'd ever done. They haven't really done one since. But the one thing that came out of it that drove cancer was synthetic progesterone, and they used it to kind of like, make bad news or bad recommendations about, or really like negative recommendations about hormone replacement therapy, but they're still handing it out to teenagers
Yeah. Without question.
without question. And it's the same. It's a synthetic progesterone. It's not a bioidentical item and not a bioidentical hormone by any means. It's a synthetic progesterone, which is what directly correlated with the cancer risk.
Exactly.
And yet,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable that this is the solution.
It is absolutely disgusting. It's, yeah, I highly recommend any woman and man to watch the documentary The Business of Birth Control.
The business of birth control.
The Business
Okay.
of Birth Control. It'll make you very angry. I'll just say that.
Okay.
It is very eye-opening to the birth control industry and how women have been so royally screwed over by all of this.
Yeah. I mean, more and more, I think we're seeing the negative impact of birth control. It can actually affect the decisions you make, your psyche. I would think if your progesterone is elevated all the time from birth control, your decision making is going to be impacted. Your emotional state's going to be impacted. Maybe who you're attracted to could be impacted.
Yeah, there's a whole science about how birth control actually changes your pheromone production. And there's like all these anecdotes of women who go off birth control and suddenly they're like not attracted to their partner anymore. It's hilarious. But yeah,
Ooh.
to that point, I was on birth control for 6 years before I learned any of this. No one educated me on this. And in those 6 years, it wrecked my gut health. It wrecked my emotional health. And I didn't know any of these things. Like the last place on earth I would have thought to look for the cause of my gut issues was my birth control. And suddenly I went off birth control and all these things got fixed. And it's like, holy crap. Like no one tells you.
So the impact of your cycle going back to normal affected your gut, your digestion, your bio? Is that what you're?
So birth control really is very damaging to your gut microbiome. So when you get off birth control, there's a whole journey of having to then heal your gut microbiome. So, I went through that whole journey and I'm thriving now, but it's crazy how many women have terrible gut issues that are on birth control and don't realize the correlation.
No, I bet they wouldn't. I bet they don't, because it's not something that people talk about much. I haven't heard
Absolutely.
much about that. Yeah.
And I wouldn't even, I was desperate. Maybe 3 years ago, 2 years ago, I was desperate because I was having these terrible gut issues. Went to every doctor on the face of the earth and no one's helping me. They run every single test. Everything looks normal. And it's like, what is wrong with me? And I eventually did, what's the doctor's name? Oh, he was interviewed on Paul's podcast.
Oh.
I'll remember his name later. But I was so desperate that I did a virtual consult with him. And, he's asking me all these questions about my health, this, and this. And then somewhere in the conversation, I was like, oh, I forgot to mention, like, I am on birth control. I don't know if that like plays into anything. And he was like, absolutely. Oh my goodness. He was like, you should go off of that immediately. Like that
Mm.
could be linked to all of your gut issues that you're having. It can at least be having an impact on it. And that was the day that I was like, I'm done.
Oh,
And
really? Yeah. You
yeah,
struggle with that long enough. It's like, if there's one thing that's making an impact, I'm going to get rid of
yeah,
it. You can
yeah.
just, it's that quick. So this is really how the struggle to get pregnant, like you said, isn't always a fertility issue as much as it might be a timing issue or an awareness of their cycle and how they're treating or the things they might be doing to impact it in a say negative is a harsh word, but it could be negative, but it might just be in that it just it's delaying things or it's causing it to be a little off, like not running on a cycle, like right,
Yeah.
not running on the same rhythm every month. So let's talk about okay, we talked about birth control, obviously, which totally just just kind of wipes it out. But and we haven't talked much about, we mentioned fasting briefly. So how does fasting, because there's a lot of, you see a lot now. I've been a big intermittent fasting guy for a decade or more. But I'm seeing more and more that, a lot of people would benefit by going on and off of it, or they have to watch if their cortisol levels, or long term there could be some stress effects, some effects of
Mhm.
cortisol. So how do you, is it as simple as you can intermittent fast during this phase but not during this phase? Is it that simple?
It can be that simple. It really depends on the woman, because if a woman has really chronically high cortisol levels, then intermittent fasting maybe right now isn't the best option for her. She needs to first get those down, regulate everything, and then she can start fasting when her hormone levels are at a healthier place. But for most women that are hormonally healthy, for the most part, they can benefit greatly from fasting with their cycle. It's I feel like fasting has gotten such a bad rap for women because there's no science. I mean, there is, but there's not the amount of science around it as there is for men. Most of the fasting research has been done on men. And then the evidence from that is then applied to women, like, oh, this is the benefits of fasting. Everyone should do it. But it's like women are so different. Men are on a 24-hour hormone cycle. So they can do the same thing every single day and it be the same. But for a woman, we're on a 28 to 30-day hormone cycle. And so we have to change what we do depending on where we are in that cycle. So for women, intermittent fasting is great during certain times, during our period, during when estrogen is rising, so during our follicular phase. And even not even just intermittent fasting, longer fasts. We can do 24 or 36-hour fasts during this time when we're hormonally healthy, and we can see great benefits from it. But then obviously during our luteal phase, we want to bring that down. We don't want to be fasting because we want to support progesterone. So it's frustrating for me when women just are completely so afraid of fasting, but I get where it comes from. You've been made to fear our cortisol levels and all these different things. So I get where it comes from, but there's just so much goodness to it. There's a great doctor by the name of Dr. Mindy Pelz. She is the leading expert in fasting for women. She has so many great resources on this. She just came out with a book called Fast Like a Girl, which is a wonderful resource. She has all kinds of good stuff. So I would definitely recommend women to check her out if they want to dive deep into it. She has a podcast as well. So
Awesome. I'll definitely have to link that to show us, because that's real. I think I've seen that question come up both sides, more and more. A lot of women do really well on it, have no problem. I see women who are postmenopausal.
yeah, that's completely different. That's a whole nother story. But yeah.
Yeah, no, that's a completely different animal at that point. I mean, you're
Yeah.
dealing with another set of hormones, but I mean, a different arena, let's say, but who have no issue. It's a great fat burning tool for them as for that becomes a different struggle. But then there's a lot of negativity around, I think, the fasting, and I really think it's not all or nothing. The argument's not all or nothing, especially with women, because you guys do have such changing systems
Exactly.
from week to week that it's a stressor. Like strength training is a stressor. With fasting, it's a metabolic stressor, or changing your carb
Hmm.
intake is a stress. It creates a certain amount of metabolic stress. And so if you're bringing in a stressor into your, let's say, your body, your lifestyle, it has to match up with what else you have going on. With guys, like you said, it's a 24-hour cycle. It's pretty basic. We just have to manage testosterone, and we're good to go.
Yeah.
Um, and cortisol levels, of course, which can affect that. But the thing is, we recover differently. So you guys, women, have so much more going on that it's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when.
When,
Is what it sounds
exactly.
like.
And I think that's where women get really confused, because a lot of women who have unhealthy hormone levels, who have really high cortisol, somehow find themselves in the pro-metabolic diet space, which is a very anti-fast space. They have this thing where you have to eat within 30 minutes of waking up.
Oh
And I
gosh.
think the pro-metabolic diet can be very healing for a woman who has really screwed up hormone levels. But I think where women get confused is they think the thing that healed them is the thing that they have to then do forever. It's like an elimination diet. You have poor gut health, and you do a really great elimination diet to heal your gut health. You don't need to be Once your gut health is healed, you don't need to follow that elimination diet forever. And it's the same with fasting for women. Like, yes, you had to follow a pro-metabolic diet. You had to eat, you know, pretty frequently to heal that. But once you're healed, there's a whole nother world of great things that you can do that you no longer have to fear. And I think a lot of women just kind of get stuck in the place of like, what helped me is what's going to serve me forever.
Correct. Oh yeah, we see that, like you said, with carnivore diet or animal-based keto and low carb, where it's the same thing. They're stressors or their elimination diets, and because they've healed a certain or reversed a certain condition, people sort of get emotionally attached and
Yeah,
identify with them. Their identity kind of gets wrapped up in it, and it starts to overpower that identity, or that attachment causes them to almost ignore the negative symptoms that it may be causing now that they're healed or they're metabolically healthy, or whatever. So it almost like this cognitive dissonance of not really looking at your symptoms,
hmm,
thinking it's got to be something else, because this magical thing that I used to do cured me of all these other things. So it's like, you're in a new place now. You're healed.
exactly.
You're
They're all
balanced. They're just tools. And
yeah,
so it's you from A to B, but B to C, your maintenance stage could be very different. It could be like you said, a secular usage of keto, of fasting, of carnivore, low, so forth,
exactly.
low
Yeah.
carb. So that's really, I think that's this all or nothing approach, and these different kind of combative schools of thought or ideology around diet and fasting. It's not helping anybody. One, it just becomes very confusing for people who are just trying to figure out what they really need to be doing.
It does. Yeah.
But I like that your approach is, let's look at what your body's, just look at how things are the rhythm of these hormones are supposed to run. Let's get those in place first. Then you put the tools in. Otherwise, any kind of effort you put forth, if your cycle's not in place, the effort you put forth in diet, exercise, sleep, they're all going to be skewed, because and maybe less impactful, because the original hormone cycle that you should be focused on initially is out of whack. And these extra tools are just making it worse because they're not being used properly.
Absolutely. I feel like a woman's cycle and her hormones is like the rising tide that lifts all ships. So that's the place. It's the place to start. We have to heal our hormones, and everything else in the process of healing our hormones, you're healing your gut, you're healing all these other things. And through the choices that you make to heal your hormones, like the I'm very, very intentional about food choices for women when they're healing their hormones. But those same food choices are the foods that heal your gut as well, are the same that heal your cells, all these different things. So, yeah.
What other factors would be coming in to disrupt the cycle? We talked about fasting, we talked about maybe too much low carb or not enough low carb. How does alcohol affect it?
Um Honestly, I'm not too first in to be able to answer that question, I would assume it would not affect it well because it's going to raise cortisol levels, affect all kinds of things. I mean, I think we know that's not going to impact anyone in a great way, but I think more than choosing, the timing of your fasting, the amount of carbs, your amount of fats you're eating, I think the food choices are some of the biggest things because most women are on the standard American diet and they're eating a ton of processed foods. They are eating a lot of processed grains, sugars, all these things, seed oils, and they're not eating the foods that are going to heal their body. And when women transition to eating a lot of good quality grass-fed meat, to having raw dairy, bone broth, to having really well cooked vegetables, to having fruit, things that are going to be healing for their body, it's insane the difference that they feel and how quickly they feel it. And then, of course, removing the processed seed oils, vegetable oils, removing the processed sugars, processed grains, everything that is triggering their body. So I think more when women can firstly, don't worry about the fasting, don't worry about how many carbs, how many fats, all these things. Just look at the food that you're eating and let's make healing food choices. And especially, organ meats, things like that can be very, very healing for women. So I think that is the most important place to start is look at the actual food you're putting in your body.
So whole food diet, make sure you're getting plenty of animal foods, animal fats when you're
Yeah.
eating
Very nutrient dense foods.
nutrient dense foods. So have you had many women come to you who are maybe, I mean, because it's the popular narrative, it's the popular thing to do, coming to you from a plant-based vegetarian, vegan diet, and their fertility is off, hormones off. Yeah. You're smiling. So I'm guessing it's
Yeah.
an affirmative.
No, I have just a funny story to relate to this is one of my best friends she was vegan for a very long time. And she, thought she'd be vegan forever. She was very passionate about it. And she started seeing health issues. She started seeing hormone issues, just various things. And I remember it was very hard for her to make that transition to starting to eat meat and things like that. But the level of health that she is at now, it's like she's a new person. She, started eating animal meat. She started taking organs. She started having raw dairy, and it has completely transformed her health. So to answer your question, yes, it's wildly transformative when a woman can go from a very nutrient depleting diet to something that is nourishing and healing to her body. It's amazing.
So what you know what triggered her, what caused her to realize that vegetarian diet was what was causing her issues?
She just, she wasn't feeling her best. She wasn't having any terrible health issues, but her hormones weren't completely aligned. She felt pretty low energy. She just didn't feel her best. And at the time, she did research and decided that it was because she wasn't getting enough omega-3s. So she was like, I'm just going to start eating eggs like twice a week. And so she started with eggs, started feeling better. Then she thought, okay, no, I'm gonna eat a little fish. Started with that, started feeling even better. And then, of course, I'm in her ear the whole time talking about organs and this and this and that. And I think just for her, it was slowly adding one thing after another and realizing that every time she added something, she felt better and she felt better. And of course, doing her own independent research and realizing that there's a lot of science behind these things. And yeah, it was just a slow journey for her, but it's been really beautiful to watch.
So help me with it, because this is a big deal. This is a big, I think, subject I think I'd like to unpack if you're willing to do it, because it's just such a dominating narrative now with a plant-based diet just being supposedly healthier, right? I thought we'd been past this in the 90s, but apparently it's come back around. Because if you let someone come to you, well, I'm following a plant-based diet, I never eat meat, I occasionally have some dairy here and there, but I don't really. So how would you explain to someone following a plant-based diet what they're missing or the negative impact on their hormones, and what eating animal fats and animal nutrient dense animal foods would give them or change? Like, how would you explain that?
I think it's hard because for a lot of women, it really is a very emotional decision. They've been told all of these things their whole life, that red meat, that butter, these things are damaging to them, and it makes them very fearful of these foods. And so in the beginning, it's really just about helping them make the tiniest little change and feel it. They have to make the decision themselves. If you try and make a decision for a woman, tell you have to do this or you're not going to be healthy, like that's not going to help. You have to hold their hand through it and allow them to choose. So, for some women, it's you got to give them a lot of science. For some women, it's you got to show them the other women that have healed this way. Let them see that other women are doing this. But it has to be a very respectful and loving and slow process for that woman to truly like feel safe to make these decisions. That's really, I think, what it is. But I think the best thing you can do is just, arm them with the science, arm them with the anecdotes of other women who are thriving, and that's the best you can do.
Yeah. So would you say it's the fat and the proteins and the other nutrients in the meat that would really is helping them produce more or
Yeah,
better
they're getting much more
hormones?
bioavailable nutrients because I mean most of the nutrients in vegetables, things like that, it's not bioavailable. So they're not getting their minerals. There's so many nutrients that they're getting depleted, and then especially all the healthy fats. Women need these saturated fats to thrive. We need the fats that are in butter, that are in dairy, and you simply don't get those things in plant foods. And then not to mention the gut harmful factors of a lot of different plant foods that are harming our gut lining, which is
Right.
then affecting all kinds of things.
The defense chemicals. Correct. Yeah. That's why I noticed you said very well cooked vegetables. So that's to really, I guess, disengage those defense chemicals.
Yeah, I've really opened up to eating because I see plants as medicine. I definitely used to be in a place where I feared eating plant foods when I used the carnivore diet as an elimination diet, and it did heal my gut in many ways, and that led me to be fearful about these plant foods. But I've really opened up in the last few years of truly seeing plants as medicine because that's what they are. And yes, we shouldn't be stuffing our body with all these vegetables every single day. It's not necessary, but there are many vegetables that have different medicinal purposes, healing purposes, especially for women. Using certain vegetables for detoxification in certain parts of our cycle can be wildly beneficial. And so when you are utilizing these vegetables for the purposes that they thrive in, for medicinal purposes, making sure they're very well cooked and things like that to break down the defense chemicals, all that as much as possible so that we can get as much benefit without getting the harm.
Right. Gotcha. Yeah. I think the fat in, we obviously use cholesterol to create hormones like testosterone and progesterone and
Yeah,
estrogen. So
cholesterol is essential for estrogen and for ovulation to occur. If we are not eating cholesterol high foods, those two things suffer. Our estrogen suffers, our ovulation suffers. And you don't get high cholesterol foods and plant foods. You need it through your eggs, through your sardines, through all those different things. And so that's a huge way that women thrive is because we need cholesterol to thrive.
yeah, and we produce it also through the saturated fat that
And
we ingest. The liver can then use that to make cholesterol as well, which most of it comes from. But yes, plant sterols or phytosterols are not the same as animal sterols. Just like plant cells have a cell wall, so we're eating. We have a cell membrane which is permeable. So, and that's what we make. We make our cell membranes with cholesterol, and so it really affects it's our biology. It's like having like for like. You've got to use the fat and the cholesterol to make things in our body that is like our own fat and
exactly.
cholesterol. So it's got to be an animal source for us to be able to utilize it. Otherwise, we're basically using resources from a source that is not like ours. A source of
We can't
fat and steroids
process.
that we can't process. We can't convert it to what we need.
And one other thing that I want to add specific to women, most women that are on a plant-based diet are anemic. And that is wildly harmful to our hormones. And so, women don't realize that when they're cold all the time, when they're tired all the time, when they get lightheaded easily, that's anemia. And if you eat organ meats, if you eat red meat, you're going to heal that very quickly. So that's
That
another.
heme iron is very available in the red
Yes,
meat.
it is.
Yeah.
So I think that's another very something that women struggle with often, that moving to a more hormonally supportive diet can heal.
Sure, absolutely, and you're right that a lot of women have been almost taught to fear it, not just from the heart health point of view, but from like, they were made to be seen as masculine foods that would make you large or bulky or masculine in some way, especially if you're exercising. Red meat's going to make you thick and bulky and manly. And it's like, no, it doesn't work. It doesn't work.
Not work that way
at all. These are nutrients that we all need, and we only have different needs for them. Men and women have different needs for them, but they are vital because they're nutrient density, not because they make you more masculine or more feminine. It's just it's why I guess a lot of women probably don't realize how much testosterone they have in their system as well.
Yeah,
they have quite a bit of, compared to estrogen and progesterone. They still have quite a bit of. They don't have as much testosterone as a man. Obviously, they have about a tenth, I think, of what a man has, but it's still a significant hormone that's part of their cycle and part of their ability to create muscle and to recover and heal.
Yes,
and so
which is vital.
It's vital.
And it's so funny to hear when I explain ovulation to women, and they're like, then your testosterone spikes. They're like, what? Testosterone? Like, we're not supposed to have testosterone. I'm like, yeah, you are.
You have a significant amount of it. If you compare it to estrogen and progesterone, it's right up there. It might even be more than what you guys have, depending on the cycle, where you are in the cycle. You can have significantly more testosterone at times than other hormones. So it's why, not to go down that road again, but it's just like it just points to the fact that the education on women's health is so lacking, and you have to go to independent sources like you and like these other people you mentioned to really get this information broken down to a place that you can really utilize it, put it into place, know how to manage it yourself, because like the docs don't understand it. They don't have the time to explain it. They don't take the time. They're trying to see 40, 50 patients a day. And like you said, that they're not paid to do that. They're paid to handle a problem, to write a prescription, do a procedure. And if there isn't some outstanding problem to deal with, that's not really their role. That's not really what they handle. So really, it's so important for each woman to understand her own cycle and her body's working, and to manage that like she would anything else in her life that's important to her.
Yeah, I think a lot of women don't realize that this is even something they need to address, simply because the way that they feel is normal to them. So for a lot of women, they've been hormonally unhealthy, have bad gut health, all these things for most of their life. And so the way that they feel is just normal. Like, that's just how, for example, like how women are made to believe that hormone, or that period cramps, PMS, all these things are just being a woman. Like, that's just quote unquote normal to experience these bad symptoms when we're on our period, but really that's a sign that something's wrong. But if you don't tell a woman that, if a woman doesn't know that when she's getting cramps and feeling like crap for half her cycle, that something's wrong, she's going to see that as normal. And she's not going to realize even that there's a problem to address or another better way to feel. And so I think that's half the problem. When women have felt a certain way for their whole life, they don't know there's a better way to feel. And when they go and they start putting these things in their diet, when they start healing their hormones, they're like, holy crap, like, I didn't even know it was possible to feel this good. I just thought the way I felt was the way I was supposed to feel.
They don't know any different. They don't know there's a better way.
Exactly. You don't know. Yeah. And
as far as they know, it's genetic, or it's it's just how I am. It's just me. This is the way my mother was. Yeah, it's because you both ate the same way.
Yeah. Like, women were not empowered to heal our own bodies. Like, we just assume that, whatever it is, it's genetic. It's just how I am. It's how I'm supposed to feel, but it's not that way. But no one's telling us that. So we don't know.
Right. No, it's important. You guys have to be empowered in a way to manage your own health. And I can't imagine how that could change someone, whether they're a female athlete. I mean, you hear it from so many of the female athletes who are really in tune with their bodies in every other way. I mean, they're like with their food and their training and their weight and how they're recovering, but
they haven't gotten their period in 2 years.
They haven't had their period. They have so many gut issues, digestive issues, and you think about what kind of performance enhancement could could be achieved
Yeah.
with these women who are already fine tuning everything they possibly know how to do.
But not the most important thing of the
And they
health.
have, yeah, and they have all the discipline to apply to it. Like they're incredibly disciplined people, you know, but they don't have the knowledge. And if they had this bit of knowledge, what they could do, performance level, just feeling better, just feeling like normal, feel like they recover. They're not struggling. They're not fighting their own bodies. And that's what I think a lot of women feel like they're fighting. They're stuck within this body. They're fighting their own bodies half the time with what they're trying to do. And they don't understand why.
Yeah. I always say that I think the most beautiful part of starting to understand and work with your cycle is that for the first time in your life, you're not going to war with your body. Because most women spend their life and we're going to war with their body. We're taught this. We're taught from such a young age that our period is an inconvenience, that it's this thing that's, we're supposed to hide, cover up, like, oh, just that thing. And so then we're literally taught that our body there's something wrong, that we're supposed to, work against it.
Something you don't talk about, something that's
Exactly. It's insane when this is one of the most important facets of our health, but also such a beautiful part of our body and our femininity. It's the thing that drives so many parts of our personality and all this. And it makes me so sad that women are taught to constantly be at war with this thing. And when you stop and you start to love it and support it and give yourself grace for all these different things, it's amazing how your relationship with yourself changes.
Oh, it's a woman's superpower.
It is.
Because that's what, I mean, I know it's maybe controversial, but men can't have babies. So, we can't get pregnant, really. It's a shocker, but that's your superpower. This is the continuation of the human race. We're seeing fertility levels go down both with men and women now. But it's truly what makes you guys, so it's your incredible gift. And I think older cultures, so if we, hunter-gatherer cultures, they knew they had the women together who would take care of the younger ones and they would show them how to do these things. They had herbs for certain times of, pregnancy and recovery. And they knew how to facilitate this and nurture this gift. And in our modern world, we're almost, like you said, we're taught to fight it, go to, and it's whether it's their personal life, don't talk about it, family, sports, work. Like, what do you mean you're not having a good, what do you mean you're not feeling good? What, it's like this, there's this overwhelming, like, push through. You're just being weak, essentially. And, rather than managing something that is, again, it's your superpower, you're fighting it. You're pressing it down. You're suppressing it. You're trying to manage it with drugs that are minimize the symptoms, or drugs to manage it, like you said, with birth control. So it's really the opposite way that should be approached, from just embracing it and then making it, facilitating it to work on a healthy level.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've gotten it so wrong.
We have. And it's so interesting because women wonder why they're suffering so much and why they feel like crap all the time. And it's like, you're not supporting the thing that makes you a woman. And I think it's so easy for women to hear this and be like, yeah, like, it's easy for you to say, like, how can I embrace my, my mood swings and my period cramps, this. Like, I don't want those things in my life. I'm not going to embrace that. But it's like, that's not how it's actually supposed to feel. Like, when you actually start living in alignment with this thing, when you start embracing it, like, it genuinely should feel like smooth sailing. And then you get to embrace that there's gifts of every single phase. When you're in the late part of your luteal phase, when you're in your menstrual phase, a woman's intuition is so heightened. It's the most beautiful thing. And it's this thing that you can recognize and embrace. And then when you're in your follicular phase, like, you have very high energy, you're very productive. There's so many different beauties of each phase that if you just let it happen and embrace it, you can enjoy them. And also I think it's such a thing for women to help them understand and give grace to their body. I remember that I used to get so frustrated when I was younger about, 1 week in the gym or running, I was doing so well. And the next week, maybe I'm feeling a little weaker, or maybe the next week I'm feeling a little more tired. And I would just be so frustrated with myself because I'm like, I am doing something wrong. I would go to war with my body and just try to push through it. But if I just understood, if someone pulled me aside and was like, hey, no, you're in your luteal phase now, like, here are your strengths, here are your weaknesses in this phase. In about 2 weeks, it's going to feel different again. I would be able to love myself and have grace for myself and not think there was something wrong with me. And it was just a basic process of my body that was going on that was normal. So, yeah.
Wow. Wow. Yeah. I mean, a lot of women would benefit from hearing that. Young women, especially, would benefit from hearing that, who are, like you said, they just feeling even more insecure and self-defeated because they don't understand what their body's going through. So, oh my gosh, Kyla, thank you so much. We've unpacked a lot. This is amazing.
Absolutely.
I really appreciate you coming on. So on Instagram, it's a Cycle with Kyla, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Kyla,
I'll link to it.
Kylah.
And your podcast is the Intentional Health Podcast?
Yes, the Intentional Health Podcast. Honestly, I don't talk or have not yet talked too much about the hormone and cycle stuff on that podcast. It's more kind of my passion little thing where I talk about barefoot running and just whatever's on my mind.
Gotcha.
So if you want the more hormone related topics, I would definitely go to the Instagram account. But if you want to just go hang out with me, you can definitely head to the podcast.
Okay. So are you coaching? You're obviously coaching women on this. And
Yes. Yep. I do virtual coaching.
what's the best way for them to reach out to you or connect with you for that?
You can DM me on Instagram, or you can email me. That's Kyla at kaismook.com. So KYLAH at KYSMOOK.com.
Great. I'll put that in the show notes too. Thank you, Kyla.
Thank you so much for having me.